Hey everybody. So earlier today I was trimming some catmint and I thought, this is one of those plants that a lot of gardeners just overlook because it's not a super showy plant, but it really is a bit of a superhero because it's a hit with all the pollinators, so it gets bees, butterflies, hummingbirds. Deer and rabbits tend to leave it alone, so that's a big plus in our area. It also is one of those pretty drought tolerant plants, so even if you forget to water it and it's kind of wilting and looking kind of poorly, you give it a little bit of water and it tends to bounce right back up, so that's really nice. I mentioned trimming the catmint, which is also called Nepeta. I say that because we found that if you trim it back, it will rebloom. So the first flush of flowers, which are usually blue or pink, are usually nice and full. Next flush usually is similar. It might be a little thinner or a little shorter, but sometimes it looks exactly the same. You can't tell the difference between the different blooms, which is really fantastic. But what we do is that we just kind of give it a shearing back, because a lot of times some of the varieties of Nepeta, they will start to flop in the middle. Now there's newer varieties like Walker's Jr., the proven winter varieties, Cat's Meow and Cat's Pajamas don't. This one here is Candy Cat. This one tends to stay upright as well. So there are varieties that do stay up, and usually it says right on the tag that it's a non-flopping variety. But I wanted to kind of show you exactly how we do that. Now, I will warn you that when you trim catmint, you find out why it's called mint, because it does have a really strong aroma, but don't think peppermint and spearmint. Think more kind of like lavender meets sage, kind of that strong sense, but you don't really smell it that much unless you're handling it or kind of around it. So what we're going to do now, this one really probably does, this one doesn't need trimming at all. I'm going to go to this one because this is the one that kind of, the blooms are still going, and if it was in the yard I probably would let it go a little bit longer, but it's ready for a trim. And what I look for down at the bottom is I make sure that there are some new sprouts coming up, which there almost always are, and that's all I do is do a shearing back. And so I just cut it back to like a little dome. It's so easy. I'm making a little mess here, but it's all good. It's catmint. It'll behave. So we cut it all back to this little mound, and this one needs a little bit of fertilizer, I can tell, because these leaves are a little bit light colored. I'd like them to be a little greener than they are, a little darker. So then we just go through, do that. Kind of hard to do this one-handed. But anyway, so I go through, get all that done, and what we're going to see is all this new growth is going to come back, and it's going to create a brand new mound, and usually it flowers again, which is just really nice because, like I said, this is the second, well, this will be the third time that we trim these, and each time we've gotten flowers off of them. So it's really, really a good plant for that, and this is a really good way to get more blooms out of it. Also helps you recover when that plant does flop. You're able to just kind of go in and kind of still redeem it, I guess is what I'd say. So by trimming it, it'll start growing. Now it does take about 2 weeks before you really start noticing the dome, and then a little bit longer for the plants. But basically we've had flower in May, June, and we'll have it again in July. So that's kind of nice about this. The other interesting thing is that one plant can go a long way because it is one that it spreads a little bit. So it's a clumper. So it will keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger, but that means you can also divide it. It responds really well to dividing. So there's a couple different ways you can divide it. So one way is, like if it's in your yard, people will just take their shovel and just go right down the middle, slice it down the middle, and then kind of dig it out around there, take that piece out, fill in the hole, and then plant it someplace else. Or you dig out the whole plant, and like this one's definitely ready for a transplant. Yeah, this is really got a lot of roots on it. And that's all I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna saw it in half. And that's a really easy way. Now but depending on the size of the clump, sometimes you can cut it into like 4 or 5 pieces. This one I'll probably just cut in half, although I think, sorry, I gotta do this down here because I'm gonna end up cutting my fingers off. Ugh. But I am getting through it all because there's some pretty good roots in there. So now I could cut this again here and I probably would get more, but I don't want to push it. I'm just going to go for these 2, and that's all you have to do is put these in the ground just like this, and away you go. And sometimes we'll just kind of cut the bottoms off, especially if we're repotting them, just because then we can put new soil down here and it'll get more nutrients that way as well. So sometimes we do it that way too. Once you put it in the ground, you do want to make sure that you give it some good water and that you keep it pretty well watered. Give it a little fertilizer as well, and you'll just start seeing the new growth really, really quickly. So I'll introduce you to a couple of varieties. This is called Cat's Meow, and this one's by Proven Winners. They also make one called Cat's Pajamas, which I think is the smaller variety. These, you don't have to worry about them flopping in the middle. This one's just getting its second flush of flowers, so we already saw flowers from it earlier in the season. Then we cut it back, and you can see where we cut it, and I'm gonna say it was probably just about a month ago when we trimmed it back, so it took a little while to get to this point. Now in the landscape, they do tend to behave a little bit differently. They might grow a little bit faster. This one here is a popular one called Junior Walkers, so it's kind of an improvement on the Walkers Low. Gets the great flower, but doesn't flop the way that the Walkers Low did. And so this is another one that's on its second flush. If we look in there, we can see kind of the previous cuts in there, and it just kind of grows right over the old cuts and you don't even notice them, and just gets that nice kind of dome of flowers. This one over here is, I think, called Kit Kat. Has a little bit smaller leaf and just kind of has that nice kind of really full habit as well. Whisper Blue is a really popular one as well. The flowers on this one are kind of nice and big, as is Whisper Pink. So this is one of the pink varieties. This one here is called Candy Cat, and this one definitely gets my attention because the flowers are a little bit more of a pink and lilac, and then the leaves are a little bigger than the other varieties, and it grows almost like a garden phlox or something. So I'd like to see this one out in the landscape because it does behave differently. The stems are really strong. I mean, they're not flopping or doing anything. So this is one I think I want to plan out and really watch because I haven't seen it before. And look at the size of the flowers, especially when you're comparing, to some of the other ones. This one's a little showier, so I'm really curious to see how that one does. Thanks for watching. Now, if you have any special tips for growing catmint, do leave some comments down below. I'd love to hear about it. And also, I'm kind of curious what you plant with your catmint, what you think looks good with it. So feel free to leave some comments down below, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video.